Thank you very much. Raed Ferris, the guy who shot that video on his phone, is a well-known activist. He's referred to as the conscience of the Syrian revolution. You should look him up. He was a cartoonist, photographer. He has survived many assassination attempts, including one about 6-8 months ago when he took 2 bullets to the shoulder from snipers, and is one of those nonviolent progressive activists that we feel so strongly to support. He also has 3 children, 3 boys, that are living in a place that is hell. He is being bombed by the Russians as we speak. He's undergone barrel bombs, assassination attempts from extremist groups. And when you talk to him remotely, or when we manage to smuggle him out, he talks about education for his kids. He talks about the future of his country, very basic things. He wants food, wants water, wants education. That is what we're here to talk about. There's a lot of political vitriol that's going around, Syrians, Arabs, terrorism. But when you meet Raed and you talk about his kids as a parent, and parents in this room, you talk about your kids, we're all the same. And that's why we're here today. I want to thank a few people. Ambassador Hoff, thank you for flying in today. Ambassador Hoff has one of the most grueling international travel schedules, and to get folks from Washington to come out to Los Angeles is definitely a feat, and I want to thank you very much. And you did bring the Washington weather with you. We have a couple other Democracy Council board members I want to recognize tonight. Angela Hawken, all the way from Malibu. Mr. Mike Medizian, all the way from the San Fernando Valley. I want to thank our staff in Los Angeles, the Democracy Council staff, people who work for us. They're the most dedicated, loving people I know. They don't work for us for the money, they don't work for us for the professional accolades, they work because they care about what they do. And we have Paul, we have Nadine, we have Christina, we have my friend Gemini, we have, let's see, who else? Caesar, Adrian, Mace is coming on board. Who else did I forget? Well, everybody, thank you very much. I want to thank everybody. A special thanks goes to the host committee for tonight. This has been an event that has been not as smooth as we would have thought. It was envisioned a couple months ago when the refugee crisis burst onto the international media, showing the world that the humanitarian crisis in Syria needs attention. That is the worst humanitarian crisis since World War II. The refugee crisis in Europe shed light on what we already knew. Ambassador Hoff talked about how many people dead, how many people displaced. It is the magnitude and the scope is beyond imagination. I grew up in a generation where we heard about the humanitarian crisis following World War II, but we learned never again. We learned that this could never happen in the civilized world. This couldn't happen in the post-World War II world with the United Nations and with America taking the lead. We'll tell you, it's happening today in Syria. Since then, since this first event was planned, we had the bombings in Paris, we had the shootings in San Bernardino, and we had mention on the presidential campaign of Syrian refugees. It has been truly a journey for me over the last few weeks. I've received phone calls and emails from people that I thought would know better, that I thought were considerate, thoughtful people that knew how what our obligations were in the world. Last week, my wife and I were at a charity event. A man came up to us, one of the most prominent business leaders in Los Angeles, a thoughtful person, a Democrat, long life Democratic activist, and he came up and he interrupted our dinner and he said, "Jim, do you know the difference between a terrorist and a refugee?" And me, I'm always good about a joke. I'm waiting for the rabbi and the priest walk into the bar and see the terrorists and recognize. I say, no idea whatsoever. Can you tell me? And he gives me the look that is such disdain, much like maybe Mr. Trump gave Mr. Bush during the last presidential election, just discounting, and walks away. And I go up to him after the dessert, and I ask, what did you mean, the difference between a terrorist and a refugee? I thought you were telling me a joke. I'm looking forward to the punchline. The idea that we can't tell a terrorist from a refugee is something that is hard to believe is a question asked in this day and age in the public discourse that we have today. I said to him, for the last 30 years, I have seen some of the worst things that man has done unto man. The killing fields in Cambodia, poison gas in Halabja in Iraq, townships in South Africa, refugee camps in Gaza. There is nothing that compares to what's happening in Syria today. Nothing in my generation that compares. And I say to him, I know the difference. I have walked the camps. A couple months ago, we were in a rehabilitation center that Democracy Council supports in Rehamli in Turkey. And it's a rehabilitation center. To get in is very, very difficult. Something like the private schools of Los Angeles. You had to lose at least one limb, most two, to get in. There was 67 beds, and there was 267 patients without limbs that were sleeping on floors trying to get help, basic medical help. I walk around and I see a 12-year-old without legs. That is not a terrorist. That is a 12-year-old child, a few years younger than my eldest child. We walk around refugee camps and we talk about providing basic education to middle school kids, to 13, 14, 15-year-old boys. We're talking reading, writing, arithmetic. Those boys are not terrorists. Those mothers that want medical care, that want basic antibiotics, that want basic medical care, vaccines that we take for granted here. I challenge anyone, whether he's running for the President of the United States or in this room, or a pundit in one of the right-wing magazines, you walk in those camps and you come back here and say, what is the difference between a terrorist and a refugee? There is a big difference. And it's very sad that the public discourse today has come to that point. We have to show pictures of children that are fleeing extremists, that have a choice to live under the occupation of extremism, the worst extremism, or not get any school at all. And we shouldn't provide them education. Let me tell you, the best, most powerful, potent tool we have as Americans, as a global community against extremists is education. Those boys that are living in those camps, those girls that are living in those camps, we don't want them to be radicalized. Providing them basic medical care, basic education is the least we can do. It is something that we should be compelled to do. It is a moral obligation, it is a political obligation, and it is in our national security interest to help them. I think General Petraeus mentioned when he described Syria, Syria is like the Chernobyl spewing out instability and extremism throughout the world. This is an issue that affects all of us. It's not just a refugee issue, it's not just an immigration issue. It's a question of how we're going to respond to extremists, to humanitarian crisis around the world. I thank you all for coming here. It's a very unique crowd. We have Muslims, we have Jews, we have Christians, we have Republicans, and we have Democrats, despite all the ones that canceled for tonight. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for supporting Democracy Council. Our work is based on supporting people. We believe that you invest in people, they will do what's right in the end. People in distress, people in chaos, people fleeing violence, that is what's going to bring terrorism and extremism to our homes. That's what Democracy Council fights against. It's not just the financial support, which I appreciate, and by the way, there are envelopes. I think all the Democracy Council people have envelopes for your tax-deductible donations. But it's also making a statement here today. For all the emails I received in the past few weeks talking about our support for terrorists, I would like any of those people to watch the video of those kids from Kafr Nabil to say thank you. All we want to do is play, because that's why we're here, and thank you again for all your support. Maha we called just a couple days ago and said, Maha, we're doing this event, can you help? And she said, Syrian refugees, Democracy Council, we'd love to. I want to thank you very much. Maha is a famous Egyptian personality who is gracing us with her talents tonight. We have food, we have drink, we have envelopes to fill out, we have artwork to buy. Thank you all for coming again.